Welcome to Got Wisdom on WCBS News Radio 880. I'm Deirdre Koppelman, along here with your co-host, JG, otherwise known as John
JG.
John Gassman.
And you're
Gassman. Yeah, we talk about topics every Saturday night to help you in your personal and professional lives. Joining us tonight, we have Jerry Acuff, a leadership and relationship expert. He's got some interesting wisdoms, including some on what's going on in that crazy White House. And you know that White House?
Yes, I know the White House down in D.C., and there are so many lessons to learn from this. And I started counting the other day. There's been, how many? I think 8 resignations in the Trump administration since January. That's almost like one a month.
Or more, actually, yeah.
And you talk about the turnover. It is crazy. Imagine in your organization, 8 people quitting within 8 months.
On your leadership team.
Yeah, that should tell you what kind of a leader are you.
You know, in the beginning, it seemed... It didn't seem like it would be a trend. It seemed like, okay, somebody took the wrong job. They're not meant to be there. They're sort of out of it. But 8 in the span of really a little, like not even 8 months.
It's huge.
It is huge. So if I had people quit, yeah, I'd say that's a problem. And then, of course, you've got the people that have been fired. Most recently, the Mooch. And I can't disagree. I think he should have been fired, although he's got a big tax issue. I'm not sure if you know about that, his capital gains.
I can't help him.
Well, tonight when we bring Jerry on, you know, Trump is supposedly a businessman. And on Gut Wisdom, we rarely, if ever, talk about politics ever. But it's come a point where you have to look at this guy's leadership or lack thereof. You've got a team that keeps resigning. He's a bully boss. We've talked about things like that. There are communication issues, verbal, nonverbal, self-awareness, lack of, empathy, lack of, how to resolve conflict. So more of that when we come back on Gut Wisdom. Stay tuned.
WCBS.
Delays of 2 hours plus.
With drive time traffic every 5 minutes. Live from Chopper 880.
We're just getting the first look here.
Plus all the latest news.
Several buildings have been evacuated.
WCBS News Radio 880.
It's Saturday night. You're listening to Gut Wisdom. I'm Deirdre Koppelman here in the studio with John Gassman. JG, what's up?
Life is good.
It sure is. So
buttons.
What do you think, before we bring our expert on, Jerry Acuff, we're very excited. Jerry's joining us in studio. He's a relationship and leadership expert. But I have to ask you a question, JG.
Shoot, fire away.
Whether you're a Trump fan.
Oh, I thought we stay away from politics.
So typically we stay away from politics, but we've got this. It's almost like when you look at all of the people that have resigned, leadership level.
Yes.
In his administration resigning.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's at least 8 people, let's say, since the inauguration.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
We can all sit here and say, yeah, there is definitely a problem with the leadership. Why are people resigning? You know, in the beginning, when the resignations, started coming in, and I think the first one was Flynn, right? I'm almost positive. Listeners, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was him or Dubke. Yeah.
But after 1, after 2, you kind of expect that. It's a new regime. It's a new leader. And, of course, with the controversy that this guy came into as president. But then it keeps going and going going.
The momentum is just beginning. Look, Spicer is out, and now you have, what's his name? Moochie, you call him.
Mooch.
Mooch.
He's
out
fired.
with it. He was
and
out.
he should have been fired.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
100%. He wasn't the right guy for the job.
You use vulgar language.
Never.
Yes, you do.
Not on air.
Right. So you've got you've got this long list of people that have resigned in leadership positions. And of course, those that have been fired. And you have to sit back and think to yourself, was this guy really, he's supposed to be a businessman. So what's the culture like? All the things that you and I talk about that we do inside organizations.
Yes.
Working and dealing with bully bosses, culture vultures, communication skills, empathy.
Yeah.
It's gotten to a point where, this guy needs a different team of people to really work on him. But we're going to hold that
100%.
thought. Let's bring Jerry Acuff. Jerry, are you there?
I am here, Deirdre. Great to talk to you.
Yeah. So you're the founder and CEO of Delta Point. Tell us a little bit about your background. And then, JG and I would like to hear what you think about the leadership lessons that this administration is lacking, in our opinion.
Yeah.
Well, Delta Point's a life sciences, mostly consulting firm. that works with large and small and medium-sized companies to help them figure out how to sell things that are hard to sell. We've worked with 15 of the top 100 companies in the world. I've written 4 best-selling books on either relationships or selling. And so basically that's what we do. We're located in Malvern, Pennsylvania. And then I spend a lot of time teaching people about relationship building, goal setting, and selling and leadership stuff. And so when I look at things like this situation in Washington, I always ask myself, what are the leadership lessons here?
Exactly.
And really, it doesn't matter which president is there. You know, if you go back and think about this for the last 20 years, there's lessons for leaders, regardless of the size of company you're running, that you can take away from these things. And this situation here just happens to be a case study in many lessons.
Right.
Absolutely.
I have a question for you, Jerry. Jerry.
Sure.
So in your philosophies on building relationships, okay, how do you build relationships with people, or how do you think you build relationships with people that you don't naturally connect with? Because, in fact, it would seem the people that have resigned and the long list of people that have resigned clearly don't connect with their leader in the White House, and for a number of reasons. But generally speaking, forget the White House for a minute. We all have to build relationships and have relationships with people that we do not naturally connect with. How do we do it?
Well, relationship building is fundamentally a process, and it doesn't matter whether you naturally connect with somebody or you don't. Every business relationship goes through 3 steps. The first one is, what do you think? And you have to think that relationships are important. You have to think the other person would want a relationship with you. You have to think that you can bring some value to the relationship. And if you don't think those things, you'll be wrong. The second thing you have to do is you have to actually learn something about them. You have to ask them questions to get them talking about the things that they treasure. And then lastly, all relationships are built on actions. And, the actions, your actions, if you want to build a great relationship with somebody, have to be consistent, persistent, and predictable over time so that I can predict your behavior. If I can predict your behavior, I'll value a relationship with you, assuming that I can predict your behavior in a positive way. The key, I give you an example. I got on an airplane with a guy several years ago, and here's what he says to me. We're sitting in first class, and he says, "I hate to talk to people on airplanes."
Ooh, okay. That's
the
down.
first thing he said to me.
So he let you know right away, like, don't bother.
And I said to myself, I had this conversation with myself, okay, Jerry, you've written 3 best-selling books on this. I accept your challenge. So right before we took off, I said to him, say, man, can I ask you a personal question? Now, I can tell you from having done this a million times, that is a great question to ask anybody who doesn't want to talk to you. Because almost everybody's curiosity will be piqued. Not everybody, but almost everybody. And they'll want to know, okay, what do you want to know? Mm-hmm. So he said, yeah. And I said, well, haven't I seen you on television? He said, yeah, what'd you see me on? I said, well, I saw you on Good Morning Arizona, which I did. Huh. And I said, but the way you answer that question, it makes me think I've seen you on something else. He said, oh, I got this whole series on A&E. I said, well, tell me about it.
There you go.
And he did for 3 hours. And he never asked me my name. He never asked me what I did for a living. He didn't ask me what I lived. When we landed in Phoenix, he jumps up out of his seat. He looks at me and he said, say, where do you live? So I live right here in Phoenix. He said, man, you and I got to get together. You are the most interesting person I've ever met.
Wow. And he never asked you a question?
Nothing. But my point is this. If you're trying to build a relationship with somebody, this is one of the reasons why it's hard to build a relationship with Trump, is because you have to understand that it's not about you, it's about them. And so
clearly,
Trump, that's hard because everything is about him.
Well, yeah. And there's something also that I recall thinking about and discussing shortly with you before we started. His leadership style is more instinctive as opposed to intentional.
Yeah, but here's the other thing, and which is true. It's instinctive. It's not intentional. And the reality is, one of the lessons here, I actually wrote down, there's 9 lessons here from this White House thing in my mind. I wrote down the top 5. Well, one of the 5, actually the one that's number 5 is, the one that I didn't in the top 5 is basically you have to know your competition. If you look at page 1 page 1 of The Art of the Deal, here's what it says. You can't be imaginative or entrepreneurial if you've got too much structure.
Yep.
I prefer to come to work each day and just see what develops. So what he's saying here is I'm instinctive.
Right.
I'm not intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the hiring of Kelly signals, and signals is probably the right term, that maybe he's seeing it differently.
Yeah.
But the reality is his style is in conflict with the kind of style necessary to run an organization where collaboration, trust, and collegiality is really meaningful.
JG, I see the look in your eyes. What you have words.
He reminds me of so many leaders that we've worked with that are entrepreneurs, that are bullies.
Yeah.
He has bully characteristics that he's going to bulldoze you over if it's my way or the highway.
Yeah.
And when you come into, whether it's a company or an organization like the White House, there is no blueprint for success.
I disagree.
It's not laid out.
Oh, I disagree. I think there is a blueprint for success, and I wouldn't say it's a step by step, but I would say golden rule principles apply, right? The blueprint for success in any place, any genre, any niche, it has to be you respect the people that you work with. You look to build relationships with people. You listen to learn, right? You communicate truthfully. I mean, so I think there is a blueprint to success, and those are the foundations that apply to everybody. But yes, you're right. I don't know. There must be rules and standards. You're the president. Here's what you're supposed to do in the next. No?
Here's why I disagree with you. When you're hiring an employee or a key person on the leadership team, you're looking at 4 elements. You're looking at their performance, you're looking at their results, and their intentionality. But the 4th thing that people should be looking at is what drives them crazy. And that's a conversation that I think every manager, every boss should have, and it should go both ways. I'm going to work with you. We need to communicate. We have to have an open dialogue. What drives you crazy? What is it that's going to bug you, and vice versa? And I don't think he has that discussion about what drives him crazy.
I don't think
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry. I don't think he has that discussion, nor do I think he really cares. I just don't think the guy cares. And
how did he become such a success then?
Well, I don't know, Jerry. What do you think? How did this guy become so successful?
Well, I actually think the things that make him successful as an entrepreneur in real estate in New York are different than the kinds of things that would make him successful as a president. And I think that's the problem.
That's a good
you
point.
read the first 72 pages of his book, he tell you everything you need to know about him. Also, protect myself by being flexible. I never get too attached to one deal or one approach. And so the reality is that what we want from leaders, particularly where, as I said, collaboration, collegiality, and trust are really important, we want people that have predictable behavior. His behavior is completely unpredictable.
Yes.
Now, a couple of things that JG said, which I think are brilliant. Number one is hiring is absolutely lesson 1 here. If you hire a dud and train them, you got to train dud, number 1. Number 2, you can't win the Kentucky Derby with a donkey. And when he hired Scaramucci, he hired a donkey to run the Kentucky Derby. You can't do that. And so getting the hiring right is really, really important. I think the other thing that really matters here is how do you create an atmosphere where people want to work for you? How do you have that conversation? I don't think he's having that conversation with people about exactly what he wants from them.
Totally.
I think he's more interested in them trying to figure out him than him trying to figure them out. And I believe that if you're going to be a great leader, I wrote a book called Stop Acting Like a Seller, Start Thinking Like a Buyer. I think everybody ought to try to think like the other person.
Well, hold that thought, Jerry. Jerry, hold that thought, because you are on the path. So hang on, because unbelievably so, I have to talk about something personal. And I know this will sound bizarre, but you know what? I have a sleeping issue, and part of it could be because of the stress that we have going on in our country today.
Or maybe with me.
Or with you, yes. But I just do not wake up rejuvenated in the morning. And I went to see Dr. Michael Gelb and his team at the Gelb Center here in New York City. They evaluated my breathing, my airways, and sleep quality, and they put together a comprehensive plan for me because I have not been sleeping well. I'm exhausted. I'm waking up. I don't feel focused. And I never knew. I don't think I snore. I don't think I have a snoring issue, but I just know something wasn't right. So when I met Well, you probably snore by the look of you. We don't sleep together, thank God. But I will tell you that Michael Gelb, Dr. Michael Gelb and his team figured out my issue. So I'd like you, if you have sleeping problems, listeners, if you snore, if you're not waking up refreshed, please call Dr. Michael Gelb today, 212-752-1662. Receive a free copy of his book, Gasp, right? That's The Hidden Path to Wellness. Stay tuned. We're coming back with Jerry. It's Gut Wisdom.
So tonight in studio, we are talking with Jerry Acuff, founder and CEO of Delta Point, about leadership lessons from the White House. And boy, this is a hot topic about things that we all can take away from what's going on down in Washington, D.C.
Totally. So, Jerry, we cut you off before. Sorry about that. We had to go to a quick break.
That's all right.
So what are you thinking there?
Well, I mean, I'm thinking, you need to think like the other person. Trump doesn't think like the other person. I mean, he defers to himself. And I think what great leaders do, and this is why I think his style is in conflict with what's needed, doesn't mean he can't learn. I mean, I actually think the hiring of Kelly, signals that maybe he's actually going to learn from somebody. I think that one of the things I know you guys are big on, and I am too, is the whole concept that self-awareness is the key to all growth and development.
Yes.
I would like to think that where Trump is now is developing some self-awareness that he needs to bring some order to the White House.
I think
the third most.
Yeah,
go ahead.
sorry. Well, I was just thinking self-awareness. I don't know that we could all agree that he's becoming more self-aware. I think in order to do that, you have to be a really good listener. And at least over the last, call it 7 or 8 months, he doesn't seem to listen to the advice that he's given. That's just an opinion. Some might think that he actually is so narcissistic that he knows everything.
Right, but I agree with that. But when it comes to a leader, when it comes to a manager, when it comes to any relationship, I think we all have to take heed in that, it's like going on the subway. There's that third rail. Don't touch that third rail, otherwise you're going to be burned. And a lot of people with Trump and other leaders that we've worked with have touched that third rail and burned themselves.
Over and over again. So what does it take to actually become self-aware? Do you become self-aware and then you just don't care? Or is it impossible to really become self-aware because you are just so inside yourself and in your ego? What do you think, Jerry?
Well, I think that self-awareness is really driven by several things. One, it is driven, I think you're right, Deidre, about, you being a good listener and wanting to actually get better. But I also think that drama, trauma, conflict, and setbacks force people to be self-aware even when they don't instinctively want to be self-aware. And I think this healthcare setback, I think that the fact he's going through all of this other, drama and trauma are things that probably forced him to come to the conclusion that, we probably need to be doing things differently here.
Yeah.
And I think when you're self-aware, you have the ability to own and be accountable for what you may have said or done that has created part of the problem, right? So
exactly. I mean,
now,
you're never self-aware if you don't take responsibility for the things that you've actually done to put you in the position you're in.
Exactly. And adding to that is, have you ever heard anybody who is truly self-aware? If you're self-aware, you have the ability to apologize. You have the ability to say, wow, I hear, I listen, I see. I may not agree. However, I can own my piece of what's going on. And therefore, I'm sorry. And what can I do differently next time? I have yet to hear an admission of wrongdoing, an admission of anything other than it's everybody else's fault and pointing fingers. So what do you think?
Well, I think JG referred to this a little bit earlier when he talked about, this sort of personality that he has. I didn't make an A when I was in college, not one. I did make an A on a paper one time, and I wrote a paper about people that self-destructed. And one of the quotes that was in the paper, I didn't write it, but I footnoted it, said, "There's no greater force in humanity than that of the egotist let loose in the metaphysical ecstasy of pride." And the reality is, lots of leaders have big egos. But an unchecked ego is really the thing that's at the center of most self-destruction. And I think that the issue here is when you have an unchecked ego, you are incapable of actually admitting that you aren't close to perfect. And I think that's part of his challenge, is understanding that the American people love people who actually own their weaknesses, who own their mistakes, who own the things that they wish they had done differently. But they only respect you if you actually ask, as you talked about, Deirdre, for that forgiveness. I've never heard him say, I wish I'd done that differently.
Right. And
I should have done that differently.
Wouldn't that make him a little more respectable? I mean, aside from the, curbing the lies or the fake news and all this other nonsense and hoopla, if the man would stand up and say, I probably should have done that differently. I own my piece in it.
Yeah, I think the attraction, though, for lots of people, certainly the people who voted for him, was the fact that he is authentic. Now you can question whether you liked his brand of authenticity. I had a call this morning with somebody who was a past president of a large pharmaceutical company, and he's the most authentic leader I've ever met. But his authenticity is around integrity and character. And to me, he's the finest leader in all the pharmaceuticals. This guy's level of authenticity is about being brash and brusque and doing what he thinks is best and being instinctive. I think the challenge is that we want people that are real. And real people make mistakes. Real people have to say they're sorry. Real people have challenges and obstacles that are difficult to overcome. Real people, as Barbara Streisand said, people who need people are the luckiest people in the world. And I think this guy doesn't feel that way because of his incredible reliance on himself. And I think that is a potentially major character flaw.
Which is lack of self-awareness. Which is the trigger, because after that lack of self-awareness, if we look at, and we've talked about this, Jerry, on our show, and of course what we do inside companies, there's this ladder of leadership, and we also, JG and I would say, agree, leadership behaviors can be seen in the playground to the boardroom. It doesn't matter how old you are, what your position is, how much you make, what type of company you work in, profit, not profit, makes no difference. Leadership behaviors, there's a ladder, okay, of I'll call characteristics and traits that you have to master. And the more of these steps on the ladder that you master, the greater leadership behaviors you display. So the first one, the foundation for every great leader, again, irrespective of anything, of where you are, what you do, age, etc., is self-awareness. Until you master self-awareness and you own part of where you are in part of things and what you bring to a table and who you are, the next step is empathy, being able to relate to the people in your world and around your world, and even people that you don't know, just like the gentleman you were talking about that you met on the plane. Didn't sound like he had a high degree of empathy. He was not interested in any kind of a relatability. In fact, you asking him to talk about himself and tell you something, personal about himself, he went off, and then only then, because he was able to divulge all of this information to you, was he even interested in, we have to get together. That man's lacking self-awareness, right? And clearly the ability to relate. So there are these steps of leadership behaviors that, can actually be learned and practiced. What, JJ?
I think you have a book in you. I think here's our next book, which is about, the ladder of leadership.
Ah, that's good.
Well, I also
You're
think
so
that
funny.
you hit on something, Deirdre, which is brilliant, and that is this, that leadership is not a title, it's not a responsibility, it's a set of behaviors.
Correct. Yeah.
One of the most impactful leaders in my life, and as someone who's hugely responsible for my success, was my administrative assistant when I ran a drug company.
Wow.
And she's been my administrative assistant for 2 years, and she taught me how to lead without authority. She taught me how to shine in front of other people. Now, she had unbelievable wisdom, but nobody would say that she was a leader, in that environment, because they would see her as administrative assistant. Mm-hmm. But she knew more about leadership, and she had it in her little finger than I knew at that point in time. I was smart enough to learn from her, And she had a huge impact on my career because she showed me how to take this disparate organization and explode the success with the United Way campaign, which made the CEO of the company think that I actually knew what I was doing. All I was doing was following what she told me to do.
And if you weren't open to listening to this, what's her name?
Her name was Annette Moran. She lives down in somewhere in Central Jersey, and she was the most wonderful person in the world and an incredible leader.
Right. So imagine if you had an ego and you weren't self-aware and you just were dismissive because this is your administrative assistant. What difference would that have made? Here's Annette, and you were willing to and open to hearing what she had to say. And that's the point. Leadership qualities, leadership behaviors. Some, it's more natural for others. There's no question about it. And that's okay. That doesn't mean that for those that it doesn't come naturally to, that you can't learn these behaviors through one, knowing that you need them, right? And two.
Yeah, no, that's the critical part is you have to understand that if you want people to follow you, if you want to be successful, then, getting the right mindset about leadership and what leadership is really important. Yeah. A leader is someone who has followers, and that doesn't imply any title. And so the question is, why do people want to follow you? Well, they want to follow you because they want to go where you're going, and they don't think they can get there unless you help them. Mm-hmm. And the reality is, Trump's in a position where that number is getting smaller, in my view, and then larger, and that's going to be ultimately a problem for him, unless he actually begins to listen to the kinds of things that Kelly will bring to the table. I do think that most of us, and I would submit to you, all of us need, somebody else to learn from.
Yes.
I have two mentors. I have one who's 32 and I have one who's 60. Mm-hmm. And I think the key is we need to like, trust, respect, and admire those people. I do think that Trump likes, trusts, respects, and admires Kelly. I think he admires his service. I think he admires the fact that his son gave his life for our country. He's got another son who's a major in the Marines. And I think if he's going to listen to anybody, he'll probably listen to him. He's certainly not going to listen to someone like Scaramucci, who basically is a mini-me.
But how did he not know that beforehand? I don't get it. I mean, I know in the hiring process, and we've worked through this, JG and I, many companies helping with their hiring processes. We tend to, in the hiring process, of course, hire people that appear to be similar to us.
Right.
Okay, which is not always. Oh, you play golf? Me too. Great, that sounds good. Or you intuitively, with some wisdom, gut wisdom, you pick up this person's just like me, and we're going to get along, and that's great. So yes, probably. Why did he pick this guy? Yes, probably because he saw the similarities, which is really, really scary. Because who knows? Who made the decision to really fire him? Was it Kelly? Was it Trump? Because if it was Kelly, and Kelly wasn't in the position he's, Mooch would have still been around potentially. And how awful is that?
But I think all of this goes back to your fundamental first point, which is self-awareness is the key to everything. I mean, if you are self-aware, then what do you know? You know, I need to have people around me in my organization who fill in the gaps that I have in my leadership armamentarium. And I can't understand who those people could be if I don't have awareness of exactly what I need to do to get better.
You know what Trump needs, and a lot of leaders need? They need us to come in and really evaluate them.
Tackle the White House, JG.
Yeah, they need to have an open, honest dialogue and a 360 about them, and willing to accept the feedback that's provided by their team, by their staff, to really see where their flaws are, what they need to really focus on and develop.
Unfortunately, you've got a bunch of yes people, whether it's in the government, yes people to your face, backstabbers behind your back. Plenty of businesses.
We met with somebody yesterday, and what did we say to them? If you're looking for a yes, ma'am,
we're not
the right people for you.
No question about it, JG. So, Jerry, hang on. We're almost nearing a break. Jerry, hi, Jerry.
Peter, how are you?
Oh, I thought we lost you.
He fell asleep, but I didn't hear him snoring.
Jerry.
So we were talking about leadership and the importance and awareness, and how often we come into companies and we don't see this. And,
So-
anytime there's a change in ownership in a company, I don't want to say regime change. That sounds kind of negative. But when you have a change in ownership, and we see this quite frequently, there's inevitably things are going to be different. New sheriff in town, new management. Sometimes they come in and just clean out the old team of leadership.
Didn't
and
that
bring
just
in,
happen to me?
with who?
So we had a client, and
Yes.
Duh. Sorry.
Us.
We had been working.
You said me. I didn't.
Yeah, sorry
you meant
about
collectively.
that.
Us.
Collectively, we had a
Yes.
client, and the CEO was asked to retire quite abruptly.
Yeah.
And okay, we had been. So I was not an employee, right? We were servicing this company.
We were consulting and helping them with their leadership development and coaching, and helping them with
So
their
many.
morale and
Leadership
Oh my
Academy,
gosh, yeah.
helping with hiring, all kinds of things for years, and doing a really good job. And the new CEO came in, and a new chief HR officer came in, and a new couple of new chiefs came in, literally like sheriffs.
New. Yes.
And they pretty much fired, I don't know how many people in senior level positions.
How scary it is for their reports not to know what's going on.
Oh, the fear. I still, to this day, I mean, that happened over a year ago, and to this
Right.
day, I still have employees who
Reach
still
out.
work there, who reach out. In fact, speaking about a maniacal leader, Jerry, you'll appreciate this. JG and I worked with a leader in Chicago. No.
Doesn't matter where.
Doesn't matter where.
Exactly.
And he was definitely maniacal. He was definitely a bully boss. He intimidated the people that worked for him.
He had an unchecked ego. That's the word that Jeff said. I love it. He had an ego that was just simply unchecked.
Very much so. And to this day also, we still have employees that reach out to us for assistance on how to deal with certain issues. So some people, you talk about that self-awareness, you talk about the leadership qualities and traits that you found in Annette, Jerry, your administrative assistant, who instinctively had wisdoms that maybe she didn't even know that they had anything to do with, helping you become who you became. Obviously, living through it, I'm sure she did. But I don't know that everybody can learn it. I just don't. Well, I don't know. I think you can. You just have to want to.
Right.
That's really, that's my correction. You have to want to be better.
Yeah. I agree with that.
The starting point of all achievement is desire.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't want to do it, then you're not going to do it. And I think that's part of the challenge with Trump is, does he really want to get better? If he wants to get better, then he certainly has the intellectual capacity to get better. You don't get elected president of the United States being a dope. So it's clearly
I bet a lot of our listeners are sitting there saying,
The best employees that we've ever seen have all demonstrated will, desire, and commitment.
absolutely.
Those have been the fundamental elements that they bring to the table: is their will to learn, their desire to get better, and their commitment to receiving open feedback and dialogue and progressing.
Yeah.
Up
Well,
that
and
ladder.
that's also how you look to hire people. And there are questions that you can ask to ascertain how much will, desire, and commitment an individual has. But aside from that, so Jerry, I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I was going to say, and my guess is that's something y'all are good at helping companies understand.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, how do you ask the right questions to find the people that are a good fit for your organization?
Totally. And it starts
the number
with
one issue for any company is to have the right people.
Correct. And it starts with understanding your unique business culture. I may be selling widgets and the company down the block may be selling the same widgets, but our company cultures are totally different. So first you have to understand, and that's what we do. We go in, understand the unique business culture. 1. 2, we've been asked many times, what are those interview questions that you ask? And we have a series of interview questions. But if I just gave you the questions, that's not enough. You have to be able to understand when you get an answer, right, it's the interpretation of the answer. And then how many levels deeper do you need to go with just one question? There's an art to it. There's a skill to it. There's a science to it. It's not just let me hire somebody who's similar to me. That will, most of the times it just does not work. It just doesn't work. So
Well,
Jerry,
I think the other thing too is what you're doing in your business, which I think is terrific, is you're doing an organizational self-awareness, which enables you to then help them figure out what are the specific questions that you need to ask about these employees for your organization, and because they're not the same for every organization.
Exactly.
And the only way that you can actually get to what are the questions that you ought to be asking is to actually go through this organizational self-awareness kind of assessment that y'all do, that I think makes it easier for people to hire, people that can make their organization successful. And hiring is so important, because not only do you have to have the right people, when you have the wrong people, it costs you a boatload of money to replace them, and they can do huge damage to your business. And so getting all that right by understanding that it's not just about what questions do you ask, it's what questions do you ask that are consistent with your business, your objectives, your strategy, your culture. And I think that most companies don't have that kind of insight, and they need people like you to actually help them figure it out.
You are chock full of wisdoms with a Z.
Yes.
This has been amazing having you on the show. How do people get in touch with you? How do we find you?
Jerry.
Well, JerryAcuff.com, which is JerryAcuff.com. My cell phone is 480-296-9972. And if people call me, don't say I didn't expect you to answer the phone. That drives me nuts. If you pick up the phone and call me, then expect me to answer the phone if I'm not on a plane or in a meeting. And then my email is jacuff@deltapoint.com, which is the name of my company, Delta, DELTAPOINT.com. So,
and you have blessed us. You have blessed us not only by joining us
some
tonight.
of his books?
Yes, you've given us the opportunity to give away 5 copies of your book, The Relationship Edge in Business, which we appreciate. So listeners, first 5 to email me at dk@gutwisdom, GUTWIZDOM.com, not while you're driving. First 5 will get a copy of The Relationship Edge in Business, courtesy of Jerry Acuff.
Love it.
Yeah, Jerry, you're a doll. Yes, JJ.
Well, thank you, Deirdre. Thank you, JG, for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely.